Hi everyone, this is Eric Bond, the founder of Beat the GMAT, and welcome to tonight's session, which is called Six Steps for a Successful Round 1. And I'm very proud of all of you for signing up for this session because, you know what, it's pretty early in the season. We're in May, we're almost June, early June, and the fact that you are here today to learn about strategies to be successful for round 1 says a lot about how on top of things you are for this coming admission season. And believe me, this early planning is really going to pay off. And this session in particular is very special because we are joined by Stacy Euler from ClearAdmit. And Stacy is going to be walking us through this presentation and these 6 steps for successful round 1. But before I actually turn it over to Stacy, I just want to say a little bit about ClearAdmit and also a little bit about Stacy's background. So ClearAdmit, as many of you guys know already, is one of the top consulting firms for helping people get into the top MBA programs. It's been around since 2001. ClearAdmit experts have actually been working with Beat the GMAT almost since the very earliest days of Beat the GMAT from 2006 and on. And I can't say enough good things about the quality of the experts and the team at ClearAdmit. I highly recommend that you check out their website, clearadmit.com, after this session. Really great website, talks about their services, but also their blog is amazing. One of the sites that I check out on a regular basis. And Stacy, who is our expert for today, who is going to be walking us through this presentation, she's a veteran ClearAdmit expert, has an amazing background. She was a former assistant director of admissions at Tuck School of Business at Dartmouth. So she has a lot of experience in reading applications, conducting interviews, participating generally in the admissions decision process as admissions officer at a top school. And before that, she worked as a recruiter at a national recruiting firm as well as for McKinsey & Company. And Stacy is actually also a veteran of a number of sessions and webinars that we've hosted together in the past, and you probably see her name all over Beat the GMAT as one of our most active forum participants. So Stacy, thank you so much for spending the evening with us and for leading us through this presentation.
Thank you for having me, Eric. So I'm so glad, just to reiterate what Eric said, I am thrilled that there are so many people that are already thinking about the applications for round 1 in the next season. I think that a lot of times it can be forgotten or it seems so far off and it's summer and it's hard to think about it, but essay questions are already coming out and now is a really good time to just start planning and really figuring out your strategy so that come September and October you're not panicking to get those deadlines. But let's go ahead and get started. So today I'm essentially giving you 6 steps to help with your strategy and planning for a successful round 1. A little bit about ClearAdmit, as Eric said, we're a consulting firm. We've been around for over a decade now. It was founded by 2 Wharton grads, and I've been here for 4 years. And just again, not to be too redundant, but I am a former assistant director of admissions at Tuck, and after that I joined McKinsey & Company, where I led their MBA in advanced professional degree recruiting, and I have over 10 years in MBA admissions and recruiting. So that's just a little bit about my background, but let's talk about why everybody's here. And these are the six main points that we're going to cover today, or topic areas that we're going to discuss. There's basically a certain amount of things that need to get done in order to complete your application, and there's actually quite a few of them that you should do, and it's good that you're thinking about doing now before the essay questions even come out. So the 6 things are obviously GMAT, goals, working on your resume, visiting campus, kind of contacting kind of quote-unquote those in the know, and your recommenders. These are all things that take a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of energy, and trying to do all of them once the essays and the applications come out can be a lot to juggle when you're working full-time. So let's start with the first one, the GMAT. Obviously, this is the first thing that I think most people should think about when they approach business school, because your GMAT score can largely determine where you're eligible to apply. Just the score and the range and being in line with what schools are looking for is really important. So it kind of helps you as you're developing a list to narrow down your schools that might be a good fit and where you might be competitive given your score. So there's obviously 3 different ways to study and prepare, and Eric's site, Beat the GMAT, does a really great job and really getting information out there about what's available in terms of test prep and different study methods and things like that. So it's a phenomenal resource. The very fact that you're on Beat the GMAT says a lot about how seriously you're taking this test. So there's self-study, there's professional tutors, or professional tutorials, and personal tutors. So I usually recommend to my clients that you pick the thing that's right for your lifestyle. A lot of people can't go sit in a classroom. A lot of people really enjoy online sessions, and they learn really well that way. So taking some sort of online course can kind of help keep them structured and accountable and meeting deadlines and prepare. Others feel a lot better when they're kind of one-on-one with the tutor, and there's plenty of sort of retired or ex-GMAT instructors out there that do personal tutoring. So there really are 3 different methods. I think that you find the one that suits you the best, that suits your budget as well, and your timeline. That's the most important thing. And then obviously just look at Beat the GMAT's website. Again, it's excellent reference for you as you're trying to figure out what's out there and what's available. I also usually recommend sort of using different study materials. Don't just stick with one brand or guide or booklet. Look at different ones, because even though it is all prepping you for the same test, they often have different methodology, which can really help as you prepare. So think about how you want to prepare, and then schedule it. A lot of people spend so much time studying only to go and try and schedule the tests the following week and not be able to get a time slot because it's full. These tests fill up really quickly, and getting a spot at your local testing center can be a bit of a challenge. So think about the date and book it early. Plus, I think that also helps motivate you and give you something to look forward to, or kind of some deadline to meet. So I'm a very deadline-oriented person. They motivate me to get things done. If I think I can kind of do it sometime in the distant future, I may never buckle down and study. So setting a date can actually be a huge motivator for accomplishing things. Oops, sorry about that, guys. The next thing you want to do is build in a buffer. And what I mean by building in a buffer is a lot of people fail to think about that you can't, if you get the GMAT, you take the GMAT and you get the score and it's not what you wanted, you can't go and take it the next week. You have to wait. And there's that 30-day waiting period there. And so timing it strategically with the round 1 deadlines is really important. So in terms of building a buffer, sorry, my computer seems to be, sorry about that. Building a buffer, what I mean is try and get this done over the summer. Thinking about it now, taking it in June or July is really ideal, because if you take it in June or you take it in July, then if you don't get the score you want, you're taking it again in July or August, and you still have time before those October deadlines. So build in that buffer. Sometimes people take the test 2 or 3 times, so plan accordingly. Taking it multiple times does not mean that you're a failure. It means that you're smart and you had a great strategy so that you're able to take it multiple times and still achieve a round 1 application, which is really important strategically. So just think about your schedule, sit down. Once the applications and essays start coming out, you'll see the deadlines for each school that you're looking at. They're generally in early to sort of mid-October. I think one of the later deadlines last year was around the 27th of October. But a lot of them are in that first week, just a couple of days apart. So as you start to sort of map out your plan, look at the deadlines for the applications, and that will help you. So frequently asked questions that I often get about the GMAT. How do schools view the GMAT? And I will be the first to say that it's not the definitive decision maker. It's not, oh, they have a low GMAT score, we're not even going to read their file. It doesn't work that way, but it does matter. It's a really important component when evaluating an application. There's basically 3 essential components. There are the academics, the professional experience, and then the personal or sort of activities and interests section. So there's 3 criteria to an application. And academics is made up of your GMAT, your undergraduate GPA, and then any other coursework or any other degrees that you have. So it's a pretty big chunk of your academics, and so it does matter. It's also a great way if you had a major that maybe wasn't very business-oriented or wasn't very quantitative to prove that you're going to be able to survive the classroom. If you don't have a lot of quant courses in your transcript, a high quant score in the GMAT can, again, sort of put an admissions committee officer at ease that you're going to be able to handle the curriculum. So the GMAT does matter. I will say when I was a decision maker, it wasn't something that would make me toss an application aside per se, but it did matter. And oftentimes those that we really liked with low GMAT scores would end up on the wait list with a chance to retake it. We were fortunate enough to be able to tell them to retake it. A lot of schools won't tell you that, so sort of knowing that you may need to retake it if you apply with a lower score, it's just good to know that going in. So while it won't necessarily make or break a decision for you. The higher the score, the better your chances, right? If it's lower, you have to make up for that in other parts of your application. The average score at top programs keeps going up every year. There's more GMAT takers, and it keeps going up. People are, I don't know, getting smarter. I'm not sure. But the average score is somewhere between, it's the mid-700s, so 710, 720, and this is top programs. I'm talking about Stanford, Harvard, Wharton, really top programs. So the way I look at it for most people is a 700 is a nice neutral score. Anything above starts to help. Anything below can start to hurt. So think about it that way. And then in terms of how many times to take the test, the general rule of thumb is 3. There's no shame in taking this 3 times, none at all. AdComs don't judge you if you take it 3 times. It's very normal. I would say that it's pretty rare these days that someone takes it once, nails it, and is really happy with their score. Multiple times is pretty normal and average, but taking it more than 3 times does start to raise some red flags. So really think about your study methods, how you might want to adjust or tweak them going forward if you're not getting the score that you want. So 3 times is the general rule of thumb. The next thing to think about are your goals. And the reason that I have this kind of high on the priority list is that your goals are needed for every single application, for every single school that you apply to. They all have some sort of version of a goals essay. You also need to have your goals drafted out and clear for your recommenders. They need to understand why you want to go to business school, what you want to do. They also need to understand many times what you've been doing and why you think that's important and how that's going to help you with your business school education and your future goals. So really being able to tell your whole story from beginning to end, or post-MBA being the end, is really important. Schools care. I can again tell you from reading applications, if I read an application and someone didn't clearly explain to me why they needed an MBA and what they wanted to do, it was a really easy way for me to dismiss them and not admit them. Just to say, they don't know what they're doing, oh, and they're young too, I'm just going to tell them to reapply, figure it out, and come back in 2 years. So don't let your goals land you in the discard pile. Think about what you want to do, connect the dots from what you've been doing to your future goals, and really illustrate why the MBA is necessary. It's not a nice to have, it needs to come across as a necessity if you want to convince an admissions committee that you should get your MBA. Why you should care, again, getting these goals defined over the summer, figuring it out will help with your recommenders. It'll also help with pretty much every single business school application, as I said before, who has some sort of form of this question out there. So setting your goals. There's short-term and long-term goals. Short-term sort of being post-MBA, maybe 5 to 7 year plan, and then long-term, really what you see is your vision. Maybe it's to be a CEO or something kind of grand and bigger, and seeing a bigger picture on where that long-term sort of stepping stone can take you. So be sure that when you draft your original version of this, the one that you're going to share with your recommenders, that you really have a complete set of goals, that you include the short-term and the long-term. Even though questions might vary from application to application on what they really want to see, it's great just to get it all down and then tweak it for each application and each essay question. But get a really complete, comprehensive set of goals. That's really important. And then kind of back to connecting the dots. As I said a few minutes ago or a moment earlier, connecting the dots is really important. So most people go to business school either to advance in their current career or to change careers. I mean, those are the 2 main reasons people go to business school. So it doesn't matter which one of those buckets you fall into, you still have to connect the dots. If you want to advance in your career, then you have to show that just staying in your current job isn't going to get you to where you want to be within the company, that you need to go and get your MBA to get a certain skill set in order to make that change and to grow and advance in the organization. You have to demonstrate that that's critical, because if the AdCom thinks for a moment that you can just stay there and by tenure alone you can get that job, they're not going to admit you. If you want to change careers, that can sometimes be just as challenging of an essay to write, because sometimes it's something completely different than what you're doing, and you have to demonstrate an interest in that area. It's not enough to just say, I really like money, and so I think going into finance would be great. That's not enough. You have to have a passion and a reason for it, or something to help you really support what you're saying. It's okay to be creative and have new ideas and be an entrepreneur, but usually these don't come out of left field. So be sure and be complete with your thoughts and really explain what you've been doing, how what you've been doing, while very different, can actually help you achieve that post-MBA goal in a different industry, what you've learned, how you can apply that. That's really important. The next component is why that school. Now, not every school will ask you, why MBA and why here, but I can tell you Tuck does, and they have for years. A lot of schools want to know not just why you want to get your degree, but why you want to get it there. So doing your research is critical. Really visiting the school, if you can, talking to alumni, talking to current students, going to information sessions, MBA fairs, whatever you need to do to get to know more about that school and personalize that essay is really important. You don't necessarily need to do this in the off season. This isn't one of your 6 critical steps, but it is something to think about in terms of the research so that you can add it back in when you personalize these for each school. So really do your research. Don't just do find and replace with Kellogg with Wharton. That's not going to work, and sometimes find and replace doesn't work, and Wharton will get left in, and they'll see that. So just do your research as much as you can and really understand the program and what they have to offer. It's great for you anyway. You're researching schools. You're trying to find a place to spend a lot of money in 2 years of your life. You might as well make sure it's a good fit. So it's good life work to do for yourself as well. As I'm saying here, Clear Goals will help you develop a broad list of target programs. And then interpreting essay topics on career goals is the last bullet point that I have here. And again, that kind of goes back to each school sort of has a different question. And some say, please tell us your career vision. Others will say, what are your short-term and long-term post-MBA goals? Some will ask, tell us what you've been doing and why you need an MBA. So there's a lot of different ways to structure it. And it's really important that you read that question. You can't simply copy and paste the same career goal statement in every single school application. Some schools, if they ask for your vision and you tell them everything you've been doing and you spend 3/4 of the essay talking about what you've done and 1/4 talking about what you want to do, you failed to answer the question because the whole essay should have been about what you wanted to do and not what you've done. So really make sure that you read the question clearly when you are writing your response. So again, a comprehensive goal statement would be great. This is what I've done, this is what I want to do, and then chop it up and make it work for each application. And your recommender should be able to see the big picture because that will help with all of the recommendations. The next thing to do is work on your resume. Again, your recommenders are going to need it, and every single business school is going to want a copy of it. So it's actually one of the most viewed documents, if you think about it, in the application process. Your interviewer will look at it, the AdCom will look at it, your recommender will look at it. There's a lot of people who are going to see your resume. You might share it with people that you meet, alumni or current students. So it's a pretty important document to have in order, and to do it now is great. So again, you can kind of hit the ground running when those applications come out. The appropriate length for a resume, or the general rule of thumb, is 1 page for every 10 years. I know that's really hard for a lot of people, but that's sort of the industry standard. I can honestly tell you from personal experience that it's really hard to get to that second page. As an AdCom member, when I would sit and read files, I'm reading a lot of files every day, and when someone feels the need to take 2 pages for a 3-year career, it's really hard for me to turn that page and take that extra time. So think about it that way. If you have more pages, you're just asking for more time, and they may not even read the second page. So whatever you say there may get lost anyway. So I'm just being realistic. Maybe not the best thing to put out there, but keep it on 1 page. I think that's really important. Again, some important things don't get lost, or staples don't come apart and they lose the second page. As far as explaining a complex job, remember that admissions officers, for the most part, tend to be female in their late 20s to their late 30s. And they often have sort of liberal arts backgrounds, art history degrees. They've been in education maybe for a long time. So while they do read a lot of applications from different industries and have a lot of exposure to different jobs, they don't necessarily know a lot about every single job and industry function. So to sort of say that they could be experts in any field, I don't think that's really possible. So you need to remember that when you're putting together your resume. Think about it in terms of, this person may not have a clue what I do, especially if you're from an underrepresented industry and maybe there's not a lot of applications in that field. The great thing about that is if you're someone that's sort of a rare business school applicant, their interpretation of your job is what you tell them. So your resume is a really great place to put together what matters to you to share with them so that their interpretation is exactly as you said it would be, because they don't have any preconceived ideas. But when you do have a complex job, just avoid industry jargon. Be really just concise in your bullet points. I generally advise my clients to have no more than 4 to 6 bullet points for their current role, and probably more like 2 to 4 for every previous role before that. So when you're thinking about length and how to put it together, that's a great way to do it. And it's also really important to remember that your resume is not your anthology. It's your greatest, or your greatest hits. It's basically, I'm sorry, it's not your anthology, it is your greatest hits. So basically, it should be a summary of your accomplishments, what you're good at. So someone can look at it and go, okay, here's Mary. She does this, and this is why she's good at it. Got it. And so it's a really easy snapshot, really great way to understand what you've done and why you're good at it. As far as gaps in employment, unfortunately, these are becoming more and more common these days. And there's really, I mean, AdComs are used to seeing them. And the best thing to do when you have a gap in employment is you really can't put it on your resume, but you do need to acknowledge it in your applications and be honest about it. Again, this is not uncommon anymore. Usually AdComs don't ask for an explanation unless it's longer than 2 or 3 months, and then one would be required. But be very honest, if you do have a long gap in employment, say 6 months or a year, you really need to demonstrate to them that you're highly involved in other things, or they might think you're sitting at home watching TV all day. So it's really important to step up the activities and other things so that you can demonstrate that you still mattered. You were still doing things that were important during this quote-unquote gap or downtime. Getting started early is really important as well. It's a great way to lay out your strategy. Not only, again, will your recommenders need this document and will you need it for every school, but oftentimes just the very activity of putting together your resume and the brainstorming required to do that will actually lend to some great ideas for your essays. So as you're sitting there and you're thinking about your accomplishments and your struggles, you might actually come up with some ideas of things that might work for your essays. So remember to write those down. If they don't make it onto your resume, take note of those things that maybe didn't fit on the resume but still matter to you, or were kind of interesting times or trying times or whatever they may be. Take note of that and write them down, because it's a great brainstorming tool and it really could be useful down the road when the essay questions come out. So the next thing is the campus visit. I get asked about this a lot. It's not always feasible for people to visit campus just because it could be on the other side of the country or in a different continent. So it's not always feasible, and they're not year-round, which is also really important. A lot of times applicants have a lot of time in the summer, but there's no one on campus in the summer. So that's actually not a great time to visit. Visiting in the spring, often schools will sort of stop doing the official tours kind of in April. Students leave campus often in May, and then schools don't often offer them in September either, as school's getting started, just to sort of, you know, make the campus a little bit more warm and welcoming for their first-year students. They often don't start tours until the second month of school, so usually October. So note that there's a gap in spring and summer and early fall. But when you do plan your visit, plan ahead. Don't just show up on campus and expect to go on a tour. Get online. They all have different things to sign up for, different activities, different tours, lunch with students, taking a class, or you sitting in on a class, or doing a Q&A with the AdCom. My advice is, if you're going to go through all the trouble to go to campus, partake in every single thing that they offer. So go to class, go on the tour, have lunch with the students, do the Q&A, do everything that they offer, plan to spend your entire day there. Also, go and grab a cup of coffee wherever they go to grab a cup of coffee, and just sit there and meet people, because students can usually spot a visitor. They kind of stand out, and usually they're dressed up a little bit more than a student, and most of them like to talk to visitors and engage with them. So it's a great way to meet a lot of people and learn a lot about a school just for grabbing a cup of coffee for an hour. So definitely take time alone to go and do those things and sort of seek out people to talk to. Also, if you know when you're going in advance, you could email club leaders and try and get some time on their calendar to grab that cup of coffee and learn more about a club that you might want to join, different activities and things on campus. So really be strategic when you plan it out and plan to spend a full day at each campus. If you do book time with professors, which is one of the bullet points that I have here, I think it's important to remember that professors, their time is extremely valuable and they're very busy. So when you do meet with them, keep in mind that the meeting should be about them and not about you. So make sure that what you're there for is relevant and that you've maybe read up on their publications and you really understand what they teach and really have a lot of questions about them and what they do, and not asking them for an evaluation of what you do and what do you, can you give me a recommendation and what do you think my chances are. That's not really the way to spend time with them. It's really should be about them. If you can't make it to campus, so if you do live across the country or you live in a different country and getting to campus isn't possible, that's okay. And business schools don't expect everybody to visit. Clearly, if you live in New York and you apply to Columbia, you better visit. But if you can't visit, if it's just truly inconvenient or just impossible to do, find other ways to connect. Business schools all start tours usually in the early fall. They go around and do info sessions. There's MBA tours. Go to all of those things. I can't stress enough how important going to an info session and MBA tour can be because they're usually those events are run by an AdCom member, a decision maker, so you can go and shake someone's hand that might read your file and will certainly be in the meeting when a decision is made about your file. And I can tell you firsthand that when I would go from city to city and do this, I would remember people. And I would remember who I liked and maybe who didn't make the best impression, but I would remember them. And so also think about that too. When you do meet people, don't expect them to have all this personal one-on-one time with you. Be very respectful of their time and courteous of the fact that they're there. Just shake their hand, give them your name, tell them you're excited that you're applying, maybe tell them what you do, but don't again sit there and expect them to listen to your entire background. Just really make a good, brief, positive connection. That's really important. And the last thing I have here is there's a lot to do online. And you can certainly, I know the GMAT has chats all the time online with AdCom members and current students and grads, and there's so many ways just from that resource alone to network and then get on each school's website and find a way to connect with people. There's definitely no excuse for not being connected and not meeting people when you apply to business school. The next topic is selecting and working with recommenders. So most schools require at least 2 professional recommendations, some require 3. And then there's the random school out there, or maybe there's more than one, that require a peer recommendation. So where do you find them? They're at work, they're in outside activities, or community service. So oftentimes a lot of people have a lot of leadership experience in things outside of the office. Maybe they volunteer, maybe they run an organization that's sort of personal to them, or they have other things that they do outside of work. That's a great way to really sort of spice up the recommendations a little bit rather than getting 2 people in the office that kind of can speak to one skill set that you have. Finding somebody else outside of the office who knows about your leadership and other skills, it's a great way to really add to the diversity of your recommendations. So I definitely recommend for professionals seeking opportunities outside of the office and seeing if there's people in your community that you work with that could support you. As far as a peer, I mean, that's pretty self-explanatory that it needs to be someone of your same level who has worked with you and has an understanding of what you do. It's not meant to be a friend. It is not meant to be somebody who you go running with on weekends and you think might say a lot of great things. It needs to be somebody who's worked with you and can really speak to the work that you've done. Preparing your recommenders. They need your resume. They'll need your essays for each school. At the very least, they're going to need that goals essay that we talked about. Anecdote list is a great thing too, so that you can kind of give them some ideas. Remember that time I did this, or I'm particularly proud of this project that I led. Your strengths and your weaknesses, because again, you can help them sort of shape your application. So have them play up the strengths that are really important to you that maybe you didn't get to mention in your essays, or things that you think are really special to you and unique to the work that you've done. And then your weaknesses, give them to them. Don't leave them to their own devices to make that up, because they may not say what you want. Even if they have all good intentions, it doesn't always come across that way. So providing your recommenders with as much information as possible not only makes their job easier when it comes to writing the recommendations, it helps you with quality control, which I think is really important. And the last thing is manage them. Really have firm deadlines. Don't tell them, oh, the school's deadline is October 7th, so anytime that day is fine. Tell them it's October 1st. They don't need to know. Manage them, stay on top of them, treat it professionally, have meetings with them, schedule them on their calendar, treat it very professionally, because they are doing you a favor. It's a professional recommendation, they're doing you a favor, but you also need to manage it too. I have had clients in the past who did not manage the recommenders, and due to late recommendations were pushed into another round. So it's really important to manage that and manage that time well. Contacting those in the know. So those in the know, this is a lot of what we've already mentioned and so far, what I've spoken to so far in this presentation, but current students, people in the workforce that are MBA alums that you work with, Navy alums in your target field. There's a lot of ways to network, a lot of ways to sort of find these people. Worst case scenario, you cold call to get this information, but really look at the alumni from your undergraduate institutions, see maybe where some of them have gone, maybe they're where you want to be and they can connect you with somebody at that organization. Really, networking is great. You're going to want to network a lot when you're in business school, so you might as well get started now. Use the club websites at the target schools to talk to club leaders, have conversations with them, meet with them when you're on campus. Whatever you can do to find out information about a school that's not readily available or published in their marketing materials is a bonus, because schools don't want you to regurgitate their marketing materials. Like, I am attracted to Tuck because it's a small, close-knit community. They know that. That's why people should be attracted to Tuck. They want to know other reasons why you might be attracted, that you really want to play tripod hockey, and that you're very excited for their consulting opportunities, things like that that they have, in their winter break. Things that you kind of have to do some research to figure out. That's the kind of thing that you should be getting from those in the know. Asking the detailed questions, not the generic questions that are readily available. So, in conclusion, the best thing to do right now, before these essays come out and before these round 1 deadlines, is to figure out your GMAT strategy and set your test date. Remember the waiting period so that you can be strategic if you have to retake. Plan that you might build that buffer in, just in case. Develop your message. What are your goals? Short-term, long-term. Figure out which schools can help you meet those goals. Narrow down your school list. Finalize your resume. Schedule your campus visits. Start looking that they come out pretty soon. Just start checking the websites periodically. Also, we update that a lot on our blog at ClearAdmit, and I know that Eric tracks a lot of that on Beat the GMAT too, so there's a lot of places where you can sort of one-stop shop and find out when essays are coming out, when tours are starting. Track that information. It's really important. Look for those info sessions when they're coming your way and sign up for them. Reach out to alums. This is a great time. They're all going to be overwhelmed. Students, when they get back to campus, are going to be overwhelmed with just trying to get back into school, and a lot of people asking them questions, and a lot of people come to them closer to a deadline, so asking in the summer, you're probably likely to get a better response and get more of their time. Same with alums. They get really sort of inundated in the fall, so ask them in the summer when they have more time. And reach out early to your recommenders. Start talking to them now. Let them know, I'm applying to business school. There's going to be 5 recommendations I'm going to need you to write. They take a lot of time. You're going to be due in October. Let's get some time on the calendar to talk about it. So, some resources available to you that we have. We have our strategy series, we have our interview guides, our school guides, and one thing I did want to mention today, just because there's relatively new, is we just rolled out our school snapshots, and there are 27 of them for programs in the U.S. and abroad, and they're a great way to kind of figure out a lot about a school and the campus, the location, the courses, just important information to really get a quick condensed version as you're starting to research schools. All right. I think I'm all set. Shall we do some Q&A?
Yes, so thank you so much, Stacy, for that. For those of you who are late to joining us, we've been speaking with Stacy Euler. She just led us through a presentation on the 6 steps for a successful round 1. Lots of great information for us early birds looking to get a jump on this year's admission season. So Stacy, I think it'd be great if we have could have you take a couple of our questions I see coming in here. The first question is from Brian. So Brian's asking, Stacy, what do you recommend for the amount of time needed to prepare for the GMAT? Do you have sort of like a range in terms of the right amount of preparation? And although you mentioned that it varies from person to person, I'm worried about burnout because I don't want to burn out during my prep. It's nice to have sort of a general rule of thumb in terms of the amount of time I should prepare for this test.
Well, I feel like Eric is probably more qualified to answer that than I am, but I will give you my 2 cents. I think that everyone sort of deep down knows about the GMAT, and if they think they're a good test taker and how they might do, taking a practice test early on can really help you identify your study needs, and especially if it's quantitative and verbal or just the quant, and really sort of help you figure out where you're deficient and need to study a bit more. A lot of these programs, if you sign up for a course, they're set over a specific amount of time, so it's sort of decided for you. There's 6-week programs, there's 8-week programs. So it really, I think figuring out sort of a needs assessment is the first step before I would just say, oh, 30 days. I think it's better to actually do a needs assessment before you determine the amount of time. But I would say anything less than 6 weeks, you're probably cheating yourself. I'm sure, Erica, do you have an opinion on that?
Oh, yes, I do. So great question, Brian. So as you pointed out, it is very difficult to have a general rule of thumb. There are some folks who can wake up one morning, decide that they want to take the GMAT, show up at the test center and get a 750. And then there are human beings, much like myself and most of us out here, who actually need to put in some work to prepare in order to earn that good score. So I'd say that Stacy's recommendation is really spot on about taking an assessment test at the beginning. I recommend going to MBA.com and downloading the 2 free GMAT tests that are provided from the makers of the GMAT. I consider them to be, these 2 tests to be the most accurate indicators of your actual GMAT performance. Software is called GMAT Prep, and it's free. And take a test, see how you do on the first GMAT. And you may find that there's not too much more to improve, that you're already within a range that you're comfortable, or that you have a lot to improve and need to do some extensive studying. So for self-studiers, I usually recommend 2 to 3 months tops for adequate preparation. 2 months is sort of the I think the sweet spot. 3 months. It starts to get a little bit long, and you actually start risking burnout as well as forgetting things. Interestingly enough, if you spend too much time on the GMAT, you actually start to forget concepts, even if you are consistent in your prep. So a lot of people don't really remember or appreciate that fact. Just a quick plug: we do have a 60-day study guide called the 60-Day GMAT Study Guide. You can sign up for it. It's a free 60-day newsletter where every day we tell you how to prepare, one day at a time. We literally, like a fitness coach, tell you, today's day 1, open up these books and do these problems. And it's a nice regimented way of going about your GMAT prep. But long story short, go with what Stacy recommended first. Take one of those practice tests, see how you're doing, and then assess from there. And you may find that self-study is a good option, tutoring may be a good option, or something else, like a course. So sorry, Stacy, I kind of took over that question there.
No, thank you. I knew that you would have a very informed opinion on that.
Yeah. So I see another GMAT-related question. And Stacy, I might be able to help you with this one too if you don't know the answer to this one. So this one's from Edward. Edward's asking, if you took the GMAT 3 years ago, would that count towards the recommended 3 times to take the GMAT? So I think in your presentation you mentioned probably good to stop after 3 times, taking the GMAT. Mm-hmm. So if you took the GMAT 3 years ago, does that count towards your 3 times?
Yes, it does. GMAT score reports show all of your attempts. So when an AdCom looks at your score report, they'll see them all. They will see the dates, and they will know the first time was 3 years ago. But they'll still see the amount of multiple attempts. So a GMAT score becomes invalid after 5 years. So if you really wanted it to kind of be a wash and go away, as if it didn't happen, 5 years is the way that works. But they will see that. So even if it was 3 years ago, it's still going to be in your score report. So if you took it 3 more times, they would see all 4 score reports there.
Gotcha.
I'm not sure if that totally answers his question, or if you have anything to add, Eric.
Oh, no, nothing else to add. I think Stacy's absolutely correct on this one. Let's take a question from Grace. Grace is asking, hi, should community leadership be on my resume? For example, board memberships. So what's the right way to perhaps demonstrate community service, community leadership on your resume, Stacy?
That's a great question, Grace. Absolutely, it should be on your resume. Oftentimes, applicants don't have a lot of leadership opportunities at work, and most of them are outside of work. So you don't want to leave that off. It's really important information, especially for younger applicants, again, who don't maybe have a lot of leadership experience yet. Don't sell yourself short. Put it on your resume. Generally, though, it's not professional experience per se. It's more of an outside activity. So when you think about the way a resume should be structured, you've got kind of the personal information at the top, your name and contact information. Then you have your education, your professional experience, and then kind of your activities section. I generally recommend calling it personal or calling it activities and interests, or something that's sort of all-encompassing where you can lump your hobbies and your personal interests in, but also put in some of these other accomplishments that you've had outside of work, volunteer experiences, activities, things like that. Put them down there. And think about it. I mean, it all depends on your formatting, so it's hard for me to speculate without seeing your resume, but you might want to add a bullet point or two that actually explains your role, or you might just be able to say the title, board number, and the dates. But it should go on the bottom of your resume and not under professional experience. Also note that you will be able to mention these within the application data forms themselves, where you'll have an opportunity, usually for the most part, to expand on the role a bit more than you would on your resume, but certainly it sounds like it's a great talking point and it should be on there.
Wonderful. I see a question coming in from Catherine now. Catherine is asking, how do you approach a peer recommendation if you don't work with any peers?
I'm so curious what you do, Catherine.
Me too.
That's a great question. So I've definitely, it's not all that unique of a situation, so you can take a deep breath, a sigh of relief there. If you don't work with peers directly, so you go to work every day, you show up in your office, and it's you and your boss, or if you work from home, or if you're an entrepreneur, there's certainly different sort of places where you might find yourself without a peer, or different roles. Usually there's another way to do it. You might have a client who could serve as that, or you might have an outside activity or personal interest that you do, right, where you have some leadership experience. Maybe you volunteer somewhere regularly, and the head of that organization, not the head because that's not your peer, but another volunteer there could really speak to the service that you've done. It can't be, as I mentioned in my presentation, a friend. I had someone last year who wanted to use her running buddy when she was on the Nike running team. She met someone and they continued to run together for years afterwards and talk about their lives and their jobs, but it wasn't relevant. They were just running buddies. It does need to be somebody who can speak to what you're doing, whether that is a client or some sort of other vendor that you might engage with through your role, depending on what you do. And if it can't be something professional, then it would need to be someone who could speak to something that you do outside of work in the community, perhaps like a volunteer role or something that you've organized, or maybe your alumni association. But you do need to find somebody to fill that, and it should be as professional as possible.
I see a question coming in from Eric, and also, by the way, Eric has mentioned he is from San Francisco, so shout out to you, Eric, because both Stacy and I are based in the San Francisco Bay Area as well. Eric is asking, regarding school visits, does Stacy have any recommendations for visiting schools in the summer when there aren't any students around?
Yes. So, Eric, great question. It's nice to have some Bay Area participation here. But yes, I do have an opinion on that, and it's a pretty strong opinion, to be honest. If it's all that you can do and you're in town anyway, do it. So don't go out of your way to fly from San Francisco to Boston just to go tour HBS and Sloan. Don't do that. But if you're there for a wedding, go for it. Or you're there to see friends or family, do it. It's just great to see the campus, and you could certainly get an idea for what it would be like to go there. There'll be some professors there and administrators and all of that type of staff. Probably not a lot of faculty, but more of the administrative staff will be there. But you won't have that student vibe, which I think is so important. So I guess my rule of thumb on that is don't plan it and go out of your way in the summer. If you're there, great, it's convenient, do it. But otherwise, steer clear and try and do it in the fall if you can, or in the spring. Well, I guess it's over now, but if you're applying next year, but in the spring would be better as well. But in the summer, you really miss out on the whole experience and really getting to connect with the community. You just get to see the pretty buildings and maybe shake a couple of hands. So it's not the same experience.
I see a follow-up question to Eric's question from Harsha, and you sort of touched on it, Stacy, which is, if campus visits are going to be scheduled in October, let's say, that's the only time you can go, is that too late for a round one submission, or for, I guess, drawing those experiences to affect your round one? Are you better off visiting a school and then applying round two if it has to be in the fall?
So that's a great question. If the application deadline falls before you can visit, I would certainly maybe find a way to allude in your application that you're planning to visit, or when you do visit, stop by the AdCom's office, shake hands with someone and say, I applied in round one, I'm so excited to be here. They understand that if you're applying to business school, there's only a set amount of times that you can visit campus and have a good experience. That it's not the summer or the spring when they close for the summertime, in order to put it into your application. So I've certainly had clients over the years who schedule it a week before and they kind of have all their essays written, but it saves some room for when they get back they can quickly insert some conversations and some takeaways from that visit. But to answer the real, I think, crux of your question, which is should I wait till round two? No. I would not say that the visit is a strong enough reason to push off to round two. Strategically, you're so much better to apply in round one, find a way to let them know you visited, and really connect with the community than to have a really great essay where you can demonstrate that connection in round two. Remember, round one really is, I mean, I'm always going to say this, but it really is the best round. And I would not put off an application just to get the visit in place. Usually these info sessions that I mentioned earlier start as early as September. And so often you can go to those and be able to connect with people before the application deadline. So use that experience if you can and connect with students, as I mentioned before, over the summer. There's other ways to get a lot of that information without setting foot on campus. So there's really no reason to wait to round two.
So Stacy, something that you just said has piqued my interest, and I have my own question, which I'm going to insert. Okay. So you are very, very clearly in the position that round one is better than round two. Or round three. Why? Why is that?
Well, so I have a theory on this, and this comes from my time in admissions. So you can take it with a grain of salt. I'm fine with that. But if you think about it this way, schools ultimately want to admit people they think will come. Yield really matters. So applying in round one, getting your stuff together and applying in round one can often send a message that school's your first choice. Therefore, you're more likely to enroll. So therefore, they might be more likely to accept you. All the seats are open in round one. And so if it's a class of 300, all the 300 seats are open. Round two, they might only have 150 seats open and more applications. So in round one, you've got all the seats open. You're sending a clear message that it's a top choice program. And then just from a strategic standpoint, you're sort of setting that bar, right? They use round one as the bar for round two. So every time they make a decision in round two, they go, well, is it as good as Jane that we admitted from this industry in round one? Well, let's go back and revisit. So why not be the person to set the bar instead of trying to reach that bar? Round two, again, a lot of the seats are gone. And round two tends to be the largest round at every business school. So you're giving yourself more competition. Not only do you have a larger applicant pool that you're competing against, but you're also competing against everybody admitted from round one who set the bar and everybody on the wait list. So you're giving yourself more competition for less seats. So also, they might think it's their second choice. You didn't get in where you wanted, so now you're applying. So again, that yield idea comes into play. That's my thought on it.
Excellent perspective from the former admissions officer at Tuck. So hope you guys are taking notes. This is one of the reasons why I love working with Stacy is very, very direct opinions. A lot of admissions experts have danced around this whole issue, but I think this is clear as day coming from Stacy. Okay, so I think we have time for just maybe 2 or 3 more questions. So this next question is from DJ. DJ is asking, is extended part-time employment, let's say 1 year, considered a gap in your resume?
Extended part-time employment.
So I think the way that I interpret
contract work, or?
Yeah, perhaps it's not being a full-time employed W-2 employee at a company, but perhaps working less hours, but on a contract basis. Your thoughts on whether that's actually a gap or true work experience?
I don't think it's a. Let me pause before I answer that. So schools do want to see full-time experience, and I think that that's a really important thing to note. So a lot of applicants say, well, I interned, and so if you count all my internships together and this, I have actually 3 years, and it really looks like 2, or they want full-time work experience. So I would have to say, if you're kind of going under that pretext that you working part-time for a year or kind of contract work or something that's not filling your minimum 40-hour-a-week full-time employment requirement, I don't think they'd necessarily look at it as a gap, but I think they'd be looking to see what you're doing with that extra 20 hours a week per se. Say it's 20, right? What are you doing with that time? Are you using it wisely? Are you developing your own business on the side during that time? You're using this money to sort of help you, pay the bills while you're starting your own company, or this was just, given the economy, this was the best employment situation that you could find yourself in for the last year, which is certainly understandable. But then what are you doing with that extra time besides looking for a better opportunity? Are you volunteering? Are you, doing something in your field that maybe you're not getting paid for? Again, you don't want the outcome to think that you're spending the rest of your time watching daytime TV, but that you're actually doing something meaningful with that. So I think it's going to be really important that you explain your employment situation in an optional essay, because it may not be that clear just from the resume and data forms exactly why you're in that situation, whether it was by choice or by whatever, the economy or whatever it may be. To me, I would want to know as an AdCom member what you do, why you're in that situation, and what you do with that extra time. I think that if you don't explain it, it's likely they're not going to interpret it correctly. So it's always better whenever you think it might raise a red flag to give them your own explanation. So that would be my advice.
Excellent. This next question from Frank is it's one that I really like. So Frank says, what do you think about discussing non-mainstream activities in your essays? For example, playing online poker professionally.
Oh, okay. So Frank, I actually had a professional poker player as a client this year. That was his full-time job. So yeah, it was really neat. He's a great guy. So I think that it really is a judgment call. I think that something like poker, just because that was an example, you have to be very careful with, because you don't necessarily know the views of the AdCom member that might read that. They might be completely against gambling. They might have personal opinions that could influence that. So you need to be a little bit careful when you talk about gambling per se, because there are some sort of preconceived ideas about it that aren't necessarily positive. So I wouldn't use it as sort of the main theme of an essay, talking about that particular experience or what you do with that, but rather maybe use it in support of something, as maybe it's a career change and it's just a personal interest that sort of got you excited about your idea, your new career, or whatever it may be. But I would not use it as the main theme of an essay. I am a huge fan of writing about things outside of work. I think that's so important, and it's so much easier to remember the guy that writes about his online poker playing habit than it is to remember about the guy who stayed late, to finish a project, right? There's definitely something to be said about writing about experiences that take place outside of the office, but use your own judgment and think about how that could be interpreted and determining what to write about. So in the poker example, maybe not make it a main theme, but make it in support of an example that you're trying to demonstrate.
Great. So a ton of questions actually coming in, but I think let's just take two more, and then maybe we can actually redirect some of these additional questions to the discussion forums afterwards. So this next question is from Laura. So the question is, I need to take some additional quant classes, but I can't imagine taking a class this summer while I study for the GMAT. Would it hurt to take classes in the fall, because they won't be finished, but they won't be finished in time by the time I submit my application? So what would you do in her scenario if, it may be too difficult to take a quant class plus say for the GMAT, but, you do want to take the courses in the fall, but maybe it doesn't finish before you can submit your app?
That's a great question. And it's actually, I just had this conversation with a client on Friday who's trying to figure out the same thing. So I kind of think as the GMAT and preparing for that as a full-time job. So when you're working full-time and you're studying for the GMAT, you have two full-time jobs. But I also think about completing the applications as another full-time job. So the way to think about it is not, I don't know anyone who can handle 3 full-time jobs. 2 is probably the max that most people can handle. So if you think that you can't take the course while you're balancing the GMAT and work, I want you to remember that doing the applications isn't going to make it any easier. You're not going to have more time than you do when you're studying for the GMAT. So just recognize that while you're probably in the throes of studying for the GMAT and realizing this is so time consuming and you couldn't add anything else to your plate, you might feel that exact same way when you're doing your applications, that you can't add anything else to your plate. So I really think it's a matter of trying to figure out some balance there. Look at your work schedule, see, does the fall get really busy for you? Are you going to actually have other things happening at work that while it seems daunting to try and do it now, it actually could be better. So my advice is take the class, have the grade before you apply, because if you don't, the AdCom might say, oh, look, she's taking accounting. I'd love to see what she gets. And they might put you on the wait list and wait for your score, and then by that point, the class could be full. So you're taking a risk by not applying when ready. And every single AdCom member, if you ask them this question, they're all going to say, apply when you're ready, which means apply when you finish the class. So I would not put off to round 2, as you heard me say earlier. I'm a big fan of round 1, just to finish the course. I would do something over the summer. Remember, you don't have to go sit in a classroom. You don't have to show up somewhere physically every day and take this class. You can take them online. There's a lot of great classes through the UC system in California. There's Harvard Extension. They actually don't have summer classes, though. The schools in Texas like UT Austin have great programs. So there's a lot of classes that you can take online that will fit into your schedule, and I would advise doing it sooner than later, because you're always going to have 2 full-time jobs on your plate between now and December. So you might as well fit it in now, just to give you that benefit in round 1, that extra boost of an A on your transcript.
Excellent. Well, that's some tough advice there. It's but I think it's definitely true, though. I mean, like it's not going to get any easier, right? So I think Laura will definitely appreciate that advice there. So we have time for just one last question here, Stacy, before we have to wrap for tonight. And I will say this before I ask this next question to Stacy, is that Stacy is a very active member of the Beat the GMAT community. There is an area called Ask Clear Admit in our discussion forums. So if there are any questions that we couldn't get to today, and there certainly were many questions we couldn't get to, unfortunately due to time constraints, highly recommend you check out the Ask Clear Admit section of the Beat the GMAT forums. So this last question comes from Deb. Deb says, I have about 9 years of work experience, but I haven't been in a study mode or student mode for quite some time. Is it fine to include certifications like software certifications or language certifications in my resume to show that I'm still capable of taking up study?
Is there another part to that?
No, I think it's
Okay.
just the certifications. Do they count towards, I guess, evidence towards being able to become a student again?
So that is a great question, and it's a great one to end on. You're not going to like my answer, though, which is it doesn't really help. And putting it on the resume, especially if it's software, the AdCom may not be familiar with that. So, you know, C++ and different things like that, that means nothing to them. It's like a foreign language. So while it shows that you're successful professionally, it doesn't really demonstrate your academic ability per se, and that it's a professional certification. I get the same thing with the CFA all the time. I have a lot of people that take the CFA and they're really proud and they want to put on their resume, as they should. It's a really hard exam to go through. But the AdCom doesn't go, oh, and he has the CFA, he's even better. It doesn't really work that way. They just know that you're really good at your job, or that if you're changing careers, you're really interested in it. But I wouldn't say that it would mitigate any concerns around your GMAT to have, you know, all these professional exams under your belt. So I wouldn't put them on your resume. I'd put them in the data forms, because that one-page resume, there's probably not a lot of room. And again, they may not recognize the language of the different programs and even know what they are. But unfortunately, I don't think it's going to mitigate the GMAT. I'm in your same situation. If I had to study for the test, I don't know what I would do. At this point, I've been out of school for so long. But recognize that. Give yourself a lot of time. And then really be realistic about programs that you can attend with the score that you get. I think that's important as well, setting realistic expectations.
Wonderful. So we've been speaking with Stacy Euler, who is an admissions expert with Clear Admits, but also a former admissions officer at the Tuck School of Business at Dartmouth. And Stacy has just walked us through the 6 steps for a successful round 1 application. A number of things that you guys can do even now to prepare for this coming admissions season. And Stacy also has just spent the last several minutes answering your questions directly. So Stacy, thank you so much for spending your time with us this evening.
Oh, it's always a pleasure, Eric. Thank you so much for having me.
Great. Well, before we wrap, I just want to mention a couple more things. I don't know if this was clearly mentioned. Maybe, Stacy, you did clearly mention this. I didn't hear. But the school snapshots that Clear Admit offers are free. They're really, really great little booklets providing an overview of some of the top schools that many of you are gunning for. So check out the school snapshots. You can search for it on Google or on the ClearAdmit site and download those. The blog that ClearAdmit has also is really excellent, as we mentioned before. You can see the URL there, blog@clearadmit.com. And I will say this, if you're interested in learning more about ClearAdmit services or even interested in getting a free assessment from Stacy, Stacy, and this is a little bit dangerous that you've offered this,
I know.
has provided her email address here. You can see it at the bottom of the slide. That's Stacy@clearadmit.com. That's STACEY at clearadmit.com. And I double-checked this with Stacy before the session. She has indeed confirmed that she is open to receiving your direct inquiries and providing information to you guys directly about an information assessment about your candidacy, as well as information about services. So you can reach out to Stacy directly at stacy@clearadmit.com. And we'll provide some of these follow-ups also via email to you guys after the event. So again, huge thanks to Stacy for walking us through the 6 steps for a successful round 1. And also a big thank you to our audience for participating this evening or morning, depending on where you guys are. We wish you all a very successful round 1 and hope to read your success stories on the Beat the GMAT community later this season. All the best, guys.
Thanks a lot, Eric.